Hi everybody and welcome to September's edition of the Zoopla UK House Price Report. We've got a bit of an addition this month. We're going to actually add the rental report on as well, so we can combine both reports, and importantly hopefully that's going to make you be able to make a decision in regards to where you're looking to invest and if you want to invest, and of course the key cities to do that in. But before we go into that, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and you can get all the regular updates from us. So look, without further ado, let's dive in. Now, as you can see on the screen now, what you can see is the Zoopla report that was actually published at the end of August, and actually it reflects everything up until the end of July 2022. Now, everyone thought this particular year, 2022, after the bumper year we had in 2021, they thought the market was certain to fall, especially as we've got high inflation, we've got cost of living crisis, but it's simply not happened. And there's a number of reasons for that. But let's start to dive into the initial facts, and then we can start to dive into the whys and the wheres after that. So we've got UK house price growth up to the end of July 2022 is 8.3% increase. You can see here that because of the way that the prices have gone, a first-time buyer actually needs an extra 12,000, well it's just over that actually, but £12,250 to buy their property. Two reasons. Why? Is because house prices have gone up. And the second reason is actually the fact that the mortgage rates have gone up. So whereas before they could get a certain amount of mortgage with their money, they now need an extra £12,250 to actually buy the same property that they would have done 12 months ago. So it just shows you that what a lot of first-time buyers are doing is they're continuing to rent, and you can understand why. Now, importantly as well, the 35% number here, that's the share of all sales by first-time buyers in the first half of 2022. The main reason being is because obviously they knew that house prices were increasing, but more importantly, they knew mortgage rates were increasing. So because of that, they got on the ladder as soon as they could to, nail in that rate, to secure that rate prior to it increasing. But we are at a stage now where we're seeing first-time buyers simply are struggling to get on that market unless they go and get a £12,250 increase in their wages, which is unlikely. You can also see here the executive summary. Demand weakening over the summer. Normal in the summer months, we normally see demand weakening, but more so than last year. Now, a lot of people are making a big, big song and dance about this. The reality is that the reason why it's diminished this year more than last year is because more people have gone away this year. If you look at holidays, what people have taken, many people last year didn't go away. Why? Well, because there was still COVID that was lingering. It was more hassle to go away last year with PCR tests and organising everything abroad. You now don't need that, so more people have actually gone away this summer than they did last summer, and hence the dampening of the demand over the summer period. You can see here as well, new sales volumes holding up. Now this is supporting the headline price growth. So we've got a number of new sales coming in. We know with our company here and what we do a lot of new sales, whether that be for residential or investments. And the reality is that we've probably had the best 6 months that we've ever had. Now, this is something that we've got to look into a bit later in more depth. The cost of living is hitting lower income households the hardest. Now, the reason why I want to go into more depth on this is because what we look to do here is who are we looking to rent to? So if we're looking to rent maybe a 1 or a 2 bed terrace house, or we look to rent a 1 or a 2 bed city centre apartment, you've got to look at your demographics. What demographic are you going to have in a 1 bed apartment in the city centre, right in the hub of things? You're going to have a young professional, bit more disposable income. Who are you going to have in a 1 or a 2 bed terraced house on the outskirts? Probably a family who that literally they can't afford to buy. So the reality is it's the lower income families that are going to have more issues than someone with a bit more disposable income. So when we're renting, who's more likely to default on the rent? The lower income family or the one with more disposable income? So the answer is obviously clear. It's the one with the lower income. Therefore, we don't want to be aiming at that market. That's why we personally stick with the city centre, higher net worth individuals, the young professionals, and it's that market where we feel that stands the test of time. And again, what you've probably seen is over the COVID years when there was this need for space, well, the reality is that's done and dusted, and everyone is now moving back into the city. So all of the people that bought with the space in the suburbs are now selling up, and they're moving back into the city centre. They miss London, they miss the Manchesters, the Liverpools of the world, and they're moving back in. You can see here higher mortgage rates are expected to have a greater impact on activity in the second half of the year. Well, that's obvious. And mortgage rates for new buyers, they're on track for 4%. And again, it comes back to the fact that outside of London, you need an extra 12,250. And in London, you need 35,000. That's a big chunk of money in terms of an increase in your wages, and that's just to stand still. So higher mortgage rates are going to impact activity and prices. That's obvious. That's definitely going to happen. But it's more of the unaffordable markets, and it's people who are going to really struggle from a financial perspective, which are going to be impacted the most. So look, let's move down. This is key as well. A lot of people have been saying, well, the prices are falling. They're not falling. It's just the demand is slightly weakening. So we're still, we head back up here. We're still 8.3% up. Okay, that's fallen back slightly, but it's still an increase. And this is what people are missing. House prices are still increasing, whatever way you look at it. So they're up £19,800 over the last 12 months. South Western Wales, again, joint performers or the joint best performers. Nottingham, again, that now stands at the top of the tree like it did last month. Manchester and Liverpool are still there, but again, Nottingham has really started to come into its own over the last sort of 6 months or so. And then as we hit down, again, what you've got here is the cost of living in the housing market. So let's look at a little bit more detail here. Now, what it basically says is high inflation and the rising cost of living hitting those on lower income first. Now, that is going to simply take a longer time to hit those on a higher income. That's normal, what happens in inflation and cost of living. So what we need to do is, as I say, when we look to rent a property, we need to look at the demographic. We do a lot of vetting, we do a lot of research on the demographic of the area. Because if we aim at the wrong demographic, you can have a nightmare rent, a nightmare tenant who doesn't pay. And with the legislation changing in regards to the rental market, then you can't just have a no-fault eviction. You can't just get rid of your tenant. And even if they haven't paid, it's not just a case of, well, they're leaving and you get a new one in. It just simply doesn't work like that. So what we have to look at is we have to look at the disposable income. It's the young professionals, as we said, who have more of that disposable income. So where are home buyers at the moment? Well, the home buyers coming through at the moment, they're in the higher income bands. So home buyers with a mortgage are going to be in the higher income brackets. What we're going to start to see, though, is that more and more people fall out of those brackets as mortgage rates increase. So as we start to see those increase, which I think that they will do, due to the unfortunate death of the Queen, what we've basically seen is the Bank of England put their rate decision on hold, but we are probably going to see another 0.25 or even a 0.5 rise, which will put that rate to or just over 2%. And again, that's going to have an impact on the housing market. But where we feel it's going to be beneficial for investors is the fact that city centres increase more than anything else. Therefore, we will see people rent for longer, especially the demographic, as we've explained, who've got a bit more money. And therefore, it's a great time for investors to still get on the ladder. Now, what we find with a lot of investors is they're either waiting for a crash. They're saying, well, I might wait for a dip, or I don't think the property prices are going to increase as much as they have been. And they're right. The property prices won't increase as much as they have been. And could there be a dip? Potentially. It won't be much, but potentially, and we'll come back down to why it won't be much in a bit. But the reality is we don't think there's going to be a huge dip. But let's say there's not a dip. You're missing out on rental income that could be coming in, year out, 5% if you do a traditional let, or 10% if you do a short-term let. So even if you did a short-term let for a year, and you got that 10% income, and the market dipped even by 10%, you still broke even. So it's still worth getting on that property ladder. At least your money's going to be doing something for you, and you're in the right investment vehicle. So what we say to people is, look, the chances of it dipping 15 to 20% we feel is very slim to none. So the reality is that even if prices fall back slightly, you're still going to be making that money in terms of your income. As we then start to head down, we've got the sales market is more sensitive to the higher mortgage rates, which we obviously know. And as I say, what we're looking at is in terms of the rental market, we still feel that's extremely strong. But what we have to look at here is what's happening in the overall picture. The suburbs will fall, and it will create a bit more opportunity eventually for people to start to move out. But for the time being, we still think that the city centres is the way forward. Again, we've got higher mortgage rates. Here we've got January 2022, new mortgage rates were still ultra cheap, but we've started to see that increase. Now let's just whiz down to the bottom slightly, because what I want to show you here is the stress testing. Now, because the housing outlook, so this is the main housing outlook that Zoopla has published. It said, look, we've got headwinds. Now, we've had these headwinds now for a while, the high inflation, higher cost of living, although inflation did fall very recently, mainly due to petrol costs, but the headwinds are still there. But have a look at this. This is key. The downsides for the prices and sales are common during recessions. That's normal. But you've got here a high proportion of today's mortgages are on fixed rate loans. Now, they've all been stress tested to see if they can afford a rate of up to 7%. That's really interesting, because the reality is if you're on a fixed rate of 2.5%, 3%, and you're suddenly going to go on a variable rate, well, you're probably, without knowing, been stress tested up to a rate of 7%. So that means your mortgage rate can go up, or the majority of people's mortgage rates can go up to 7% before any issues at all. So when it comes down to the main, what's going to happen with the house prices here, it says it's got baked resilience in the market that's going to limit the downside for prices. Now that's really key, because a lot of people think it's a straight race between high mortgage prices and people can't afford the mortgages. But if they've been stress tested, which didn't happen back in the early 2000s, hence part of the reason why they crashed, part of the reason liquidity as well. But because they weren't stress tested, then that's why we had the issue. But if people have been stress tested up to a rate of 7%, that's really, really a good sign for the market. And then as we start to head down in terms of the cities, you can see that Nottingham is at the top here. The Bournemouth, Leeds, Manchester, Leicester, Liverpool, Bristol, Birmingham, Portsmouth and Belfast make up the top 10. It's pretty much the same 10 that has been there over the last year. They're just moving around a little bit. And of course, right at the bottom, we've got Aberdeen, who's fallen yet again. But as we head down, you can see London, 4.1%. That's actually ticked up more than typical months. But it's still, for us, is the Northwest. Your Manchesters, your Liverpools is key here. So overall, it's a great report. It's positive. Yes, we know there's headwinds. Yes, we know there's issues with potential increased mortgage costs coming up. But the reality is, overall, is that we still think that the property market is the way to go. Now, as we then go over to the rental side, let's have a look at the rental market. You've got a 12.3% annual change in rents, positive. So that means that clients who bought a year, 2 years ago have not only made fantastic growth, they're getting 12% more on their rent overall. 36% is the share of demand for two-bed flats. Now, some cities change depending on what city you're in. Some cities have more demand for two beds, some one beds, but again, it's just saying here 36% is the demand for two-bed flats. And look at this is key here, minus 46% of stock. So stock has diminished in terms of homes available to rent, minus 46%, which is unbelievable. So it's got here, as I say, as we move down, rents on average moved up 12.3%. Average rents risen by 115 a month to 1,051. Of course, some cities are a lot more expensive than that, some cities cheaper. The London rental market, which it does say here is unsustainable, has increased at 17.8%. Now, I know what some of the guys are renting here. Their rent has gone up ridiculous amounts. It was expensive before. They're looking at one beds at around 2,200 to 2,400. They've recently, within the last month, put their rents up over £3,000 a month. Now that is extortionate amounts of rent, but they're paying it. One of the girls in the office, she left her rent because she thought it was just extortionate, and within 2 days they filled it. So it's not as if people aren't coming in and filling it; they are. So rents are going up, but they're still being filled. You've got here, this is key as well, cost of living pressures. Now, whereas everyone before was looking for space, they wanted more space, bigger properties, more land, now it's gone the other way. Because of the cost of living pressures, energy, heating your homes, they're now looking at smaller homes. So demand for two-bed flats has increased, and where do you find the flats? You find them in the city centre, so hence everyone's coming back to rent. And you've got here, this is key, 40%. So the cost of gas needed to heat a purpose-built flat is 40% lower than a three-bed house. So you're saving 40% on your energy bills by moving into an apartment. Why? Well, there's a number of reasons. One, it's smaller, and two, of course, when everything's huddled together, the reality is it retains heat a lot better. So it's got here a huge undersupply. The chronic undersupply of rental homes shows no sign of changing. So we think rents are going to continue not only in 2023, we think they're going to go through to the next 2 or 3 years. Because the reality is the construction has still slowed, which means that new flats coming onto the market is painfully slow, and hence why we think that the rents are going to keep increasing. So we've spoken about, obviously, the chronic supply shortage. And again, you can see here the average letting agent has 8 homes to rent. That's it. Half of that back in what it was back in 17 to 2019, but 8%. 8 homes, sorry, that's a tiny amount. It's got here signs that annual rental growth is peaking. Well, it will in London, let's be realistic. In London, that, you know, we can't keep increasing, because eventually people just say, no, I'm not paying those kind of rents, and they'll move back home, they'll move back in with family, friends, or they'll combine rents and they'll move into a 2-bed flat, which economies of scale is a lot cheaper. But again, it's pretty key here. You've got the urban areas is outpacing the rural markets because strong employment growth drives demand in cities. You know, we're talking about unemployment is low. Now that's one of the key things that's fueling inflation as well. One of the key things why they think that there's going to be an easier recession, because we are still at low unemployment rates. People are still, I mean, we know here with our recruitment drive, it's tough to get good candidates in. We're always looking for good, solid candidates, and it's tough. So the reality is they've been snapped up by other companies, or they're already comfortable in a long-term job. But the reality is that demand in cities is extremely high. It's coming back, and it has been coming back for the last 12 to 18 months. But we're now seeing two things. Not only are they coming back for the jobs, they're also coming back for the smaller homes, because smaller homes mean smaller running costs. And you typically get smaller homes in city centres, especially major city centres like London, Manchester, etc. Rising rents are going to obviously add to the cost of living squeeze, but then as we come down, you start to see what people are actually looking for. And as we've said already, 2-bed flats are rising faster than 3-bed houses. And if rents are rising faster, it's more attractive to landlords, landlords go and buys, and it pushes up the cost of the properties in 1 or 2-bed flats. But in terms of as we start to head down, what do people do? Well, if they've got money to spend on rent, they save elsewhere. So what you'll tend to find is people are going to still be renting those 1 and those 2-bed flats. And I know, as I say, with the guys in the office, someone's rent who's gone from 2,200 to 3,000, they'll find that £800 elsewhere. They won't go out. Simple as that. It's expensive in London. You know, you're talking £8 to £10 for a pint of beer, for example. You go out for a meal for 2 people, you should be looking at least £100, £120 with a couple of drinks with that. So the reality is you know, you have 4 meals that you don't go out on during the month, you've saved close to £500 there. And with a few more tweaks, you can easily save that £800 because the reality is these things are so expensive. So overall, let's go head down to the bottom, and it's really similar in terms of where rents have increased the most. But look, Manchester, top of the chart. So all of our clients who got involved in Manchester previously are doing fantastically well. Glasgow, Bristol, Birmingham. Now I want to take the Glasgow and Edinburgh with a bit of a, not a pinch of salt, but a bit of a word of warning. Look, we've seen rent freezes. They could have literally killed that buy-to-let market overnight with certain rent freezes. So that's why we've always avoided Glasgow and Edinburgh, because it doesn't have the same outlook as England. But again, you've got Manchester there, and you've got Liverpool, which is our 2 main cities. They're in the top 10 there, but Manchester's been phenomenally good. And this is the average income on, or the average rent, I should say, on a traditional let. And of course, we do short-term lets as well in the areas, which is going fantastically well. We've got clients who have bought £160,000 to £180,000 properties, making over £20,000 a year just in terms of their rental income on those. So look, overall, things still look strong. Can you make as much money as you could a year ago? No, you couldn't. The reality is you missed the boat on that, but it doesn't mean that you've missed the boat totally. So we've still got strong growth, we've still got strong income. So of course, never a good time, never a perfect time, I should say, but always a good time to invest. So look, have a lovely rest of the month, and we'll be publishing these regularly with the rental report every single month. And as I say, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.